All right, hi everybody. We are live here now in real life, real person, at the Taking Control of Your Diabetes TCOYD office here in beautiful San Diego, California. Thanks as always for joining us. Quick intros: Dr. Jeremy Pettis, Steve Ellerman, Schaefer Bader, Tricia Santos. We're all diabetes doctors working at the University of California, San Diego. And this is our time that we're going to actually answer your questions live as they come in. So we know that people are already entering their questions into the chat. Trish can see those, and we'll just go through as many as we can. Real quick, wanted to say that that opening session, first of all, we had a great time filming all these things. Steve showing me how to cook was a lot of fun, and airing our grievances, etc. But that opening session we filmed, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And we were just talking that it's so incredible that in that short amount of time, a couple of major things have happened. Some of you commented in the chat that the Dexcom G7 was actually FDA approved just 2 days ago. So that's kind of hot off the press that this has now officially been approved in the US. It's been approved in Europe for, I don't know, 6 months or so. So we finally have it approved here. So that'll be exciting to see when that actually gets into the clinic and start using it, et cetera. And the other major thing that we alluded to is a drug called teplizumab, and the marketing name is called TZIELD, is the first ever FDA-approved drug to delay the onset of type 1 diabetes for people that are at risk of developing type 1. We talked a lot about what that is, but basically we can look in the blood for autoantibodies, and let's say your first-degree relatives, my kids, your kids, anybody, and if these antibodies are present, they would be potentially eligible for this medication. That's a 14-day IV medication. So you come in and get the infusion for about 30 minutes every day for 14 days. That's the treatment. And in the clinical trial showed to delay the onset of type 1 diabetes by, on average, about 3 years. So we're going to be hearing a lot about who do we screen, how often should we screen, all those kinds of things will need to be worked out in the coming days. But just wanted to highlight that because gosh, things are happening so fast, and that's amazing.
That is such a great point, because when we were at the FDA months ago, when they heard the data on TZIELD and if they should approve it or not, and there were some really smart doctors that were saying, well, what's the big deal? Delaying diabetes a couple of years, and they just have no clue.
Yeah.
They're smart people, but they just have no clue as it relates to delaying type 1.
Yeah, 3 years, give me a break.
And some
3 days without diabetes.
Yeah, and some people in the study never even got type 1, and others got it sooner, but on average. And so you'll be learning a lot about that.
And also we're wearing our festive stuff. This is the thing I was wearing, one of the outfits we had in our song. And Steve actually put on a tie for the first time in 3 years.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I haven't put on a tie. I had to go watch a YouTube video to get it on, because I forgot my Christmas sweater that I wore for the filming. But it's a Christmas tie.
You got it on and you instantly dipped it in your cup, I saw.
I saw that. Oh. I was leaning over and it went into the water.
Yeah. Well, anyways, Trish, do you have questions you want to get into, or things that are coming through?
Questions already. I think, like you said, one of the things I love about these kind of constant live sessions that we're doing now for TCOYD with all this access is that diabetes is changing so rapidly. It's kind of always been that way, which is one of the reasons I love it and what makes it so much fun. But now it's literally every month. I feel like we have something new to talk about.
Type 2 as well.
Yeah. So there is a question in here with one of the newer medications for type 2 diabetes, but we do have some people for type 1 using it for other reasons. There's a question on Mounjaro. And I know Steve likes to say Mounjaro.
Mounjaro.
But the question is, does Mounjaro replace Trulicity and Jardiance? So maybe you guys can talk about kind of how, which medications does it replace? What's the benefit? Should people be kind of running to the drugstore to get this newer medication?
Schaefer, you want to?
Schaefer, go for it.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, so again, Mounjaro is a new, what we call a dual agonist. It acts in 2 different receptors on these hormones that our body makes normally. And it has, it's sort of what we consider a supercharged version of the GLP-1s, which are like Trulicity and Ozempic that we've been using for a number of years. They work really well, approved for type 2 diabetes. And again, occasionally we do use them sort of off-label in type 1 or for other reasons like weight loss. But great class of medications, very powerful. Mounjaro is just sort of like an even more powerful version of those other medications, the once weekly injectable medications. And so in my opinion, it could be a potential replacement for those, for the Trulicity, Ozempic, or other GLP-1 medications. From what we understand about it so far, it does what they do, plus maybe a little bit more in terms of lowering A1C and weight loss in particular. There's always more data coming out about the potential benefits for protection against the heart. And so those medications we know offer protection against heart attacks and things like that, which is one of the reasons why we use them as much as we can. So I think Mounjaro is a big deal, and I think it will help replace some of those medications. On the other hand, if you're doing great with your Ozempic or your Trulicity and you know your weight is where you want it, your A1C is good, it doesn't mean you have to necessarily go change. There may be some more side effects with the new medication, similar side effects like nausea, that sort of GI stuff, just because it's sort of it's like kind of like the same idea, just stronger. And then,
Yeah.
you know, the other question was about Jardiance, which is a different class of medications completely.
So it's not a replacement. In fact, Jardiance and Farxiga, those two are similar. They're used all the time with these other drugs. You know, Schaefer, you did a great job because it's pretty complicated science to explain, you know, how these drugs work. But you're right, they're similar to the GLP-1s in many ways, but just a little supercharged. That's a good way to say it. But you don't really pronounce Mounjaro correctly. So.
Yeah, I don't.
You know, the one thing I'll say about these medications is there's a lot of access issues right now, and certain insurance companies, you know, prefer Ozempic versus Trulicity versus Mounjaro. And I would say take whatever one you can get your hands on.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
they're all excellent at lowering the A1C, causing significant weight loss. They're all great.
Yeah, it's important to note that, you know, that there's a shortage of Ozempic and Mounjaro. So you might have to call around to a lot of pharmacies. The companies are working like crazy to build up the supplies. But the problem is a lot of folks that do not have diabetes have been hearing about Ozempic as a great weight loss drug. And so these movie stars have gone on Twitter and Facebook, and everybody is getting, and that's why there's a shortage.
I think, well,
How much are you on?
I think a lot of people will hear about this. It's in the lay press. You know, Elon Musk is taking Ozempic,
Is he?
and the Kardashians. And while that's true, I don't think it's these celebrities are gobbling it all up. They have had supply chain issues in actually producing it. But you know, a lot of people are taking it. So for me, it's actually kind of simple. If you have type 2 diabetes, you should be on one of these GLP-1 type medications, and that's Ozempic or Trulicity or Mounjaro. And you probably should be on one of these SGLT2 medications also, like Farxiga and Jardiance. They're all great options. They help people lose weight. I mean, it's really impressive what these medications can do. And it's a little bit more complicated for type 1s.
Yeah.
But the company that makes Ozempic is actually starting to look into clinical trials to test it in type 1s. To see if it'll help with blood sugars a little bit, help reduce weight. So I personally think it's likely in the next couple years that we'll have actually FDA approved GLP-1s for type 1s. They just haven't done the studies yet to approve it, which just means that your doctor can prescribe them, but they're generally not covered by insurance, which is you can't pay out of pocket for these things because they're like $1 zillion.
expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I do have some type 1s who are on Ozempic, and one of the nice things if you're trying to get these medications, so Ozempic and which is the same medication, Wegovy, it's the same exact medication, just has a different brand name. But that medication is approved for weight loss alone. So if you have type 1 and you're overweight or obese, which there are plenty of people with type 1 who can be overweight or obese, you can ask your doctor to prescribe it for that reason. And sometimes that's a way to get it approved, but it is tough.
Yeah. Let's say one more thing about the SGLT2 class, the Farxiga and Jardiance. Now that group of agents have been shown to reduce congestive heart failure and reduce the progression of diabetic kidney disease, both of them now. And they get the formal indication by the FDA that says what they work for people with and without type 2 diabetes. And that means people with type 1 fit into the without type 2 diabetes category. So if you have chronic kidney disease or issues with congestive heart failure, you know, talk to your doctor about getting on one of these two drugs for sure.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say is if this all sounds like gobbledygook to you with these different, you know, medication names, it can be kind of confusing. Trish actually did a really good lecture that's in the video vault. I think it's called like New Medications for Type 2 Diabetes or something like that. just go to the TCOYD website, click on watch the video vault, and you can go to type 2 new medications. And there you can see pictures of these medications, the actual names. You can take notes and kind of write it down and go to your provider. So if you want more specific information, go check that out.
I'd say one last thing that pertains to the whole program. This is important. We have a brand new access page. So a lot of you have said to us, hey, this is great. You talk about all the latest and greatest devices, drugs, but I can't get it. So we spent 6 months building this page. And if you have issues with getting these medications for the best price, go on there. Even if you have it now and you get them, go on there because you can still save money.
Where do you find it? Just on the TCOYD website?
Oh yeah, we have a big click on our homepage. Yeah.
It's called access, access these medications, and it's, getting copay cards, trying to get these things, for
patient
cheaper.
assistance programs, everything.
Put it on the screen. They
Oh.
can see it.
Great.
Thanks, Eric.
I want to stay on the topic of these medications just for one more minute because there are a lot of questions. One question here says, if a type 2 already had a heart attack, which meds do you think would be best? And I do think, we've talked about this in several talks kind of across the board, but I do think it's a really important point to hit home. Schaefer, maybe you can start.
If a type 2.
If a type 2, but I mean, we can talk about type 1s too, as well. If they have heart or kidney disease,
right.
Can you kind of hone in on that point?
I'll start again because I know these two will fight for the last word.
Yeah.
So if you have known heart disease, really, it's definitely type 2, but if you're type 1 as well, if you have known heart disease, then, first of all, there's 2 different types of heart disease, right? So a heart attack suggests that you had a blocked artery, and we call that atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Again, is long terms, but that means you've had a heart attack or you have some blocked arteries, if you've had to have stents put in, or if you've had heart surgery, that sort of thing, bypass. Then really those GLP-1 medications are the ones that have the most power to help sort of protect the heart, along with improving blood sugar. And so those once weekly injectables, the GLP-1s like Mounjaro and Trulicity, Ozempic, those are the ones that we know help with that type of heart disease. Heart failure, the SGLT2 medications, the once daily pills like Invokana and Jardiance are the ones that are really, really powerful for those. And so it depends on the type of heart disease. But for sure, you should be on a GLP-1 if you've had a heart attack in the past, as long as you can tolerate it.
Yeah, I just think, again, if you have type 2 diabetes, you should be on a GLP-1 and an SGLT2, and especially if you've had any kind of heart disease or any kind of kidney disease. But to me, it's getting simpler that I personally think everybody should be on these medicines as soon as they're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes because they work so well.
And the guidelines have started to finally catch up to that idea that probably Jeremy's been saying for years, and Steve and us have been saying for years, that these medications, beyond what we're doing for blood sugars, really we care about protecting the heart and protecting the kidneys. And so it's thinking about the benefits of those medications for those organs and protecting our body, even beyond anything that's happening with the blood sugars. So it's not just, hey, is my A1C where it is? If not, do I need more medications for my blood sugar? That's not the point. It's these drugs protect the heart, protect the kidneys that's using them.
Yeah, this area is so important for type 2s and type 1s. And Jeremy will be the first to tell you the leading cause of passing away in type 1s is also heart disease. So we share that condition. But I would say this for all of you, that you're going to have to be your own advocate because most doctors aren't used to using both these drugs early. They usually save them till way late. So be nice, be firm. If your caregiver doesn't want to listen to you, change doctors. Switch to Dr. Pettis.
There's a lot of openings.
That's a really good segue because there is a question here from someone who says, how can I reboot my doctor? And so I want to kind of switch gears here and talk a little bit about insulin pumps, which may be a little more relatable for our patients with type 1, although we do have type 2s on these pumps, these systems now. So there's a few questions here. So let's start with this one. I want to use Fiasp in my Omnipod, but my doctor won't let me, essentially. How do you all feel about using these rapid-acting insulins in the new insulin pumps?
Jeremy?
Yeah, so I would say Fiasp and Lumjev are approved to use in pumps. You absolutely can. And some people use it and they find benefits, and I think that's fantastic. I think a couple anecdotal things have come up with these newer insulins, specifically in pumps. I've had patients say that they feel like they get occlusions more, or that by like the third day it's not working as well. Lyumjev specifically can also sting a little bit. So it's not to say don't try it, but just be kind of mindful of it. Like, see, the whole goal is that if you switch to these, they might help, with those post-meal spikes, which is a problem for everybody. And it can help to kind of blunt those, which is fantastic. So if you do switch, just see, are my blood sugars improving or not? Am I having more occlusions? Is it sting? All those kinds of things. But absolutely, it's approved. So your doctor shouldn't give you really any pushback because this is, it's approved.
Yeah, and your doctor also, depending on your insurance, may allow that insulin or they may not allow it, which means he has to do or she has to do a prior authorization, which is a bunch of paperwork. And so it's complicated out there. But if you feel that Fiasp really helps you and you miss it being on your Omnipod 5, I think you said, I would just push constructively.
Yeah. I will say when these first got approved, they were only for injections and they got the approval later for pumps. So maybe providers are still kind of stuck in the initial indication, but both are absolutely approved for pumps now.
Yeah. Schaefer, would you like the last word?
No, I actually have a question. I actually wanted to see what you guys thought about the rebooting your doctor. And I think because that's like sort of a tough, I don't have a good answer for it. And I'm not sure, obviously I don't know exactly what that means. It depends on your relationship with your provider. And it depends on, one answer is if you're just not getting along and you're not seeing eye to eye, like try a different doctor, but that's not always possible. I mean, maybe you have one doctor in your town or one endocrinologist that you can get in to see. So it is, I don't know, it can be a tough thing.
Yeah.
Well,
I have a suggestion after Jeremy.
Yeah, yours is probably gonna be more blunt than mine, but
no, it's not.
First of all, you absolutely can change providers. Like I don't know about you guys, but I don't take it personally. Nobody's ever switched out of my clinic though. But in the event that they did
They're not allowed.
not want to see me anymore,
Dr. Cho will give you grief.
it happens. Not every relationship always works, and so for God's sakes, it's your health. Change your provider. I think people get so hung up on I don't want to upset them, or if I change to another provider in the same practice, are they going to talk about me? That doesn't happen. If you're not seeing eye to eye for whatever reason with your provider and you tried, then switch. And if you can't, if you're literally this is my only person in town or whatever that I can see, then see them, get your medications, but go to places like TCOYD to get information to take to them. To say, hey, I want to try X, Y, or Z. You just have to be more proactive. Final thing I'll say though is that because of virtual visits, it does extend a little bit of the area that you could potentially be seen. So maybe you could see somebody 100 miles away or something that you could see virtually.
Yeah, I'll just say one last thing. We know the relationship between doctor, caregiver, and healthcare provider and patient. It really is. Us patients have to have trust in our caregiver, and the caregiver, the HCPs, have to have empathy. So I think I answered that question online when a person asked it, that bring a box of See's candy in and say, you spend a lot of time on me, you've helped me with my health, I'd like to give it to you as a gift. And by the way, I would like to try this insulin. So get off your frickin' and give it to me. You know what?
Eat more blunt.
My point, the point is that you need to soften them up a little bit. That's one attempt, whether it works or not. But I find that a box of chocolates always works. I bring them to the nursing, the front office staff. I get any appointment I want. I get any time of the day. They call me back. They answer my questions. It really works.
Yeah, and I think, along those lines, I think sometimes providers also don't want to prescribe something because they may not be familiar with it.
That's right.
And I think, to be frank, it is very hard as a medical provider to keep up with everything. And so if you're seeing a primary care doctor who has never heard of Lyumjev or Fiasp, that is not uncommon. Even some endocrinologists may not kind of have comfort with it. And this is the one thing I love about TCOYD is this is exactly what the name says. You take control of your diabetes. You're getting educated, and this is where you can bring it back to your provider and kind of ask.
I saw a lot of questions during the conference today about people that their doctor never heard of Afrezza. Mm-hmm. They don't want to prescribe Afrezza. Afrezza causes lung cancer, which is crazy. So that's probably one of the biggest frustrations for people looking for these fast-acting insulins. more than Lumjev and Fies.
Now you brought up Afrezza. There was a question here just while we stay on kind of this insulin pump issue. Can you use Afrezza with these automated insulin delivery systems? So Tandem, Control IQ, Omnipod 5, Medtronic.
Well, yes. So it's not technically, again, like approved because they haven't studied it in conjunction with these pumps, which means that sometimes you might get pushback of using it, insurance-wise. I've found personally that I can get it covered for people to use Afrezza in addition to whatever insulin they're getting on their pump. And I actually think that it works very well, that people can take Afrezza, let's say at the start of the meal, and not enter those carbs into the pump, so it's not really messing up the algorithm. And then if their blood sugars kind of start creeping up after a meal, the pump can kind of like kick in and take care of it. So that combination, personally, I think works very well. I know the company is studying it, or has plans to study it in conjunction with these pumps, so we can get it approved, et cetera. But I kind of look at it as a 1-2 punch. You have the Afrezza doing like the real quick stuff, and then the stuff through the pump you can kind of add on later as a more of a delayed insulin, so it works well.
So so if you use it, you would not enter carbs, and you would just kind of try to have those like cancel each other out, so the pump doesn't get confused.
Yeah.
What if you use it as a as a correction if you have a high blood sugar?
Yeah. So I think if you use it as a correction, keep in mind that the pump's already trying to correct you. In general, I think we all find that those corrections are not quite aggressive enough. So I think doing a little touch of Afrezza sometimes can definitely help, especially if you're having those like stubborn highs, you're 250 plus. It's going to take forever to come down with just the pump. So 4 units, 8 units of Afrezza, something to kind of like bring it down. I don't know.
Speaking on the other side of that point, we've been educating patients who are on these automated systems to not treat lows with as many carbs because the pump is also already, suspending or, decreasing insulin delivery. Steve and Jeremy, do you have experience with that? Would you agree with that you don't necessarily need kind of the traditional amount of carbs that you normally would?
Yeah, I think that happens a lot. That I mean, yes, you probably need less carbs, but the problem is that it's hard to stop.
Yeah.
So what I find is I just rebound, a lot sometimes. Like when I literally will have 0 insulin on board because the pump is taking it all away, but I'm still like low, and eat as much as I was going to eat anyways, and then it's easy to kind of rebound high. And then actually what can happen, which is frustrating too, is then you'll go up, and the pump will see you going high and start bolusing or trying to correct, and then go low again. That can happen sometimes too.
Yeah, these hybrid closed loop systems, there's kind of new problems that popped up when you try to micromanage too much. But with Afrezza, first of all, it's important to say that the makers of Afrezza, Mankind, they cannot ever suggest what we're telling you. As Jeremy said, it's not FDA approved. They didn't tell us to say it. They didn't call me 5 minutes before the program to tell me what not to say. No, but I do think that the way these systems work is supposedly, at least the looping and the tandem, the basal rate that goes up and down is based on your predicted blood sugar. So if Afrezza lowers your blood sugar, it should adapt. And so
the nice thing about Afrezza, if you were using it outside of the pump, as opposed to like, let's say giving like an insulin injection from a pen outside of the pump, that Afrezza is so rapid on and rapid off.
That rapid off's key. Yeah.
That rapid off is really the key part.
That's the key. Yeah.
And that's because it'll come, it'll do its thing, but it'll be out of the system much longer than if you were using a pump and you were like, I'm sick of this high, and you gave an injection. That insulin's there for hours and hours.
You're right.
And then the pump really is going to have trouble dealing with it, I think, but relatively.
Okay, one last question while we're on the topic of these insulin pumps. There was a question in here which was basically asking about kind of some unexpected maybe rises in glucose because the pump was kind of adjusting the insulin based on how much insulin was on board, et cetera. And this particular person was told to kind of ignore those rises. And I'll kind of throw this into a bigger question. What has kind of changed in the way that you have to manage your diabetes when you're on these pumps? Meaning, a lot of the times we're telling our patients, you kind of have to let the pump do its thing to some extent. And I think for people who've had type 1 for years and years, that's a really big change in mindset.
You might want to explain, because we have, for every type of person with diabetes, what these systems are a little bit, because there's some people out there that probably have no clue what we're talking about. We don't want that to happen.
Well, so I think what we're talking about really are these newer insulin pumps that what we call our closed loop systems or hybrid closed loop systems. And so what that's basically made up of an insulin pump, which just gives the insulin, the CGM that's measuring your blood glucose in real time, and then some algorithm that lets those talk to each other and decides the insulin dose. So these newer pumps are really good at seeing what your blood sugar is and then using that information to decide how much insulin to give you. They don't do all of the work by any means, but especially for that basal rate, they'll adjust it all throughout the day and throughout the night. If your blood sugar goes high, it'll give you a little extra bolus to help correct that down. And so it's basically thinking and working all the time. And so some of these questions are related to, you know, if a person with type 1, for example, who's been used to doing all of that micromanaging all the time, now the pump's doing a lot of that work, you know, how do we sort of navigate that, I think, is the question.
Yeah, and I think the question is getting at this, that you're on one of these systems, your blood sugar's 220, it's been 220 for an hour, and you're mad that it's not coming down. And a lot of times people will enter fake carbs. They'll say, I'm eating 30 grams of carbs as a way to get the system to give more insulin. And we always tell people not to do that because that can mess up the algorithm. It's already trying to bring you low, so it can make you crash.
You do it all the time.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts about that. So, you know, if I enter carbs for a meal and I go high or start going high, frequently I will enter more carbs if I thought that I actually just underestimated the carbs to begin with. So in that case, I don't think it's entering fake carbs. It's like, oh, I under bolused. But if you are just kind of high, you shouldn't use that as a technique to just correct your blood sugar. If you're finding that you think you have to enter these fake carbs frequently, you probably just need to change your sensitivity factor, have it just be a little bit more aggressive to correct your blood sugar rather than doing these fake carbs. It's all nuanced, and if that made sense to you, God bless you. You can try to make these adjustments on your own. If not, just talking to your provider about, you know, how do I correct high blood sugars when I'm on these systems.
And I have found that patients tend to need a more aggressive carb ratio and a more aggressive correction or sensitivity factor on these systems kind of across the board. Not everybody, but in general, that seems to be kind of the trend. Mm-hmm. So we're going to kind of move on from the insulin pumps. We have a lot of other questions here. One question here, and I want to kind of go on to the topic of continuous glucose monitors, CGMs, is there agreement on the blood glucose range and time in range needed to prevent the onset of complications over a lifetime? Can we talk about maybe what is time in range first, and then maybe address the question?
Yeah, I don't need that. I can. Yeah, you know, time in range has been a relatively new term thanks to continuous glucose monitoring, but it's defined as the percent of time that your blood sugar is between 70 and 180. So the goal is 70% or more, and that's about 17 and a half hours a day. Eric, can you hear me? Okay, and that's kind of a goal for most people. If you're older and you have lots of medical illnesses and you got to be careful about lows, then your goal is above 60% or 50%. But that's the bottom line with that. And I want to also say that this range, it wasn't just pulled out of a hat. They had a big consensus conference, and this is the range that you're supposed to be before and after meals. So it brings them all together. And if you have 70% time in range, your A1C is most likely going to be around 7 or less. And that is the range that's safe, where you will not develop these classic complications of diabetes.
Yeah, I think you said it all. I mean, like the higher the time in range, the better. But yes, 70%, we know there's evidence supporting that puts you at very low risk of developing complications. It's never zero. Things can always happen, but that's our goal because that's what we want to do to keep people safe.
Thanks. Okay, along those lines, there's also another question here, which I think may be relatable, which is my time in range on my CGM is 90%, but I can't get which is excellent, by the way, and difficult to do, but I can't get my A1C less than 7. So I think we should talk about the discrepancy between A1C and time in range. Personally, I tend to look at time in range much more than A1C now. There's a lot of problems with A1C. There's also kind of different time measurements that they're looking at. So maybe you guys want to comment on that.
Schaefer, I want to see if you get it right.
Pop quiz.
Because that's my favorite topic.
This is a fantastic question, and Trish, first thing we'll talk about is the time ranges, and Trish brought that up. It's really important to understand that even if the A1C is doing its job perfectly, which it oftentimes is not, it measures, gives us an idea of the average blood sugar over the past 2 to 3 months. And if you look at your time in range, depending on how you have your settings in your app or your whatever you're looking at, that may be over the last 14 days or 30 days. And so those numbers won't be the same. They won't necessarily match up. And that's especially true if your blood sugars have been changing recently. Maybe they were higher 3 months ago and you've been working and now your time in range is much better. Your time in range will be higher, which shows a better blood sugar numbers than your A1C would suggest. So that's in like the best case scenario, and that's assuming that the A1C is actually measuring what we expect it to measure, which is your average blood sugar. That's not always the case.
Yeah, not bad. B plus. Well, I'm kidding. Well, Schaefer made a great point. You got to go to your look at your 90-day average, and then your CGM will calculate what they call a GMI, glucose management indicator. It's like an estimated A1C, and I've said this for a lot of times at professional conferences that is really your true A1C. And as you mentioned, also the lab that measures the A1C could be way off. And there's a formal study that you can be 0.7% off. And if you have anemia, if you're African American, if you're pregnant, you have some of these other, ready for this one, hemoglobinopathies. So I would say for the person asking the question, take your 90-day average and look at the GMI. That's your A1C. And the lab just doesn't measure you correctly. Or just for those of you that see differences, just take the lower one.
I mean, this is Steve's crusade because,
yeah.
his estimated A1C on his CGM will usually say something lower, and then you get your A1C test in the lab, and it's higher, and it makes you upset.
Every time. There's something weird with my blood.
So, it's a long way of saying that the A1C can be inaccurate. And we really, when there is a discrepancy, we really rely on the CGM more than the A1C, because the CGM tends to be a more truer reflection of what your blood sugars actually are doing.
Great. Okay, and it's also important for those of you, most people with type 1 diabetes are on a CGM now. A lot of our patients with type 2 are, but if you're not and you have type 2 diabetes, it definitely is something you should look into. I think we're really moving towards the point now where these are going to become standard of care for type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, and sorry. In our video vault, Schaefer and I did a lecture called Think Like an Endo, and we just go through the download. And we look at all the different things that your caregiver, I always say caregiver, could be your wife, but your healthcare provider looks at. It's all the same language. So it's important for you guys to understand that, starting off with a good question about time and range.
Now, along the lines of CGM, can you guys tell us about the Dexcom G7 that was just approved and kind of how it varies from the G6 and the older version?
Yeah, I just want to say real quick for type 2s on CGM. First of all, CGM is approved for anybody on mealtime insulin, whether you have type 1 or type 2. But if you're type 2 on, let's just say, basal insulin, you can at least get a prescription, for mealtime insulin to take, if you need it. So you have that on your file, and that might make you eligible to get a CGM. Because right now, it's not technically approved for people just on basal insulin.
On some insurances.
Some insurances.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it's worth asking, but there's ways kind of around it. And then the G7, it just, again, hot off the press 2 days ago. It has a number of advantages. It's a little bit, smaller, potentially more accurate. To me, the biggest advantage is that the transmitter and sensor are all in one thing. Sure. I think everybody that's used a Dexcom, it's a fantastic product. I've used it forever. It's a pain to have a separate transmitter and sensor that are two different prescriptions. You might have to, I've definitely put on a sensor before, and then the transmitter's just expired, and they're just not synced up. Or you lose the transmitter, heaven forbid, and there's, then you're out, I don't know, $500. So having them all together in one unit, just easily to apply, is a huge advance. Yeah,
there's a 30-minute warm-up time versus 2 hours, and they added 12 hours onto the life of it. But it's might as well talk about the Libre 3. You familiar with that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, go for it.
Well, the Libre 3, if we're on the topic of CGM, so it's the other sort of newest CGM from one of the other big CGM companies.
You can say Abbott.
Abbott, Freestyle Libre. And I mean, kind of, honestly, kind of the same idea in some ways, like an incremental benefit compared to the last version, which was the Libre 2, and then now 3. And but it's smaller. The accuracy is actually the same as the Libre 2. It's the same, like the science is the same in the little sensor, so it's measuring the glucose in the same way. So it's just as accurate, but it comes with some more features. Again, it's smaller and
you don't have to swipe it.
you don't have to swipe
That's
it.
a big difference. Yeah.
It's a true continuous glucose monitor now. So that data goes automatically to your receiver, which is your app in most cases on your phone. And that's kind of, in our estimation, I think makes it more of a real CGM that can be used in people that have type 1 diabetes, or people that are using insulin injections, or people that have had problems with low blood sugars like hypoglycemia, because that blood sugar data is constantly going to your phone, so that if you set up alerts and alarms for things like low blood sugars, you'll get those rather than having to swipe. And if you have a low blood sugar on a device you have to swipe, you might not swipe. So
another important thing I'll say about the G7 real quick is that yes, it's approved, but we're expecting some delay until it integrates with the pumps.
Yeah.
So if you're on Tandem Control IQ or Omnipod 5, I wouldn't run out and go right to the G7, because my understanding is it's not going to immediately work, that they're expecting several months to get that kind of figured out. So definitely keep your eyes on TCOYD, whatever, sources to figure out when that happens before you switch. If you're just on a G6 and shots, then by all means jump to the G7 right away. But
it's also, I hear, going to be a several months before they do a complete rollout until it's actually available across the country. So maybe a while until anybody gets it anyway, but we'll see what it.
Yeah, it's same for you people that are looping. If you don't know what that is, look it up on Urban Dictionary. To round out the field of CGMs, I mean, we do have a different form factor made by Essentia. It's an implantable CGM called the Eversense. It now lasts 6 months. And some folks, depending on your lifestyle or other factors, that might be an option for you.
Great. All right, I want to finish with this topic, which I think is really important right now, which is the holidays. And I think for people with diabetes, there can be a lot of kind of worry or fear around kind of how to manage everything with all the holiday parties and different food, or maybe you're in a different environment and you're traveling. So this question says, I have anxiety around food during the holidays. I want to just eat more and dose more, but I can't seem to get my A1C down, so this doesn't help.
I'm not going to start this one. I don't have diabetes, and so it's a little hard for me to speak to, but I do just want to say that I have anxiety around the holidays in general. And so it's this weird time where
You worried about your weight?
No, thankfully for me, that's not a big concern, but it is a concern.
Yeah.
And there's just it's this time where everything's supposed to be joyous and happy, and in many cases that's a part of it, but there's a lot of other things that stress people out in the holidays, and not everybody has, close loved ones, and it can be a hard time in a lot of different ways. And even in the best of situations, there's a lot of stressors. There's travel, and there's food, and there's a lot of different things going on. So I really feel for this question, because holidays can be difficult, and that's even without diabetes.
I'll make a quick comment and let you finish up. Is that you may have to lower your goals during the holidays and just say, okay, I'm going to be a little bit higher than usual. I'm going to do the best I can, and not worry about it too much. And of course, how much you worry about it really depends on you as an individual. But I also think that during the holidays, there's just, having a continuous glucose monitor, whether you're a type 1 or type 2, whether you're on insulin or not, can be very helpful as a way to sort of help reduce your blood sugar by ways other than medication. A little bit of walking in between, the two different types of pies you're gonna taste. And it's just one of those periods where you can't be perfect. And the other thing too is, I'm not sure if the person that asked that question actually saw our first lecture at the conference, which is your grievances, because we did cover a lot of that stuff during that first section. And if you did watch it, you got a short memory. No, I'm kidding.
No, I think you said it, but I think it makes sense that this is a stressful time for everybody, particularly people with diabetes or worried about your weight, that these things are naturally at odds with each other. We all want to indulge in food and tasty things, but we all also want to lose weight, and we all also want perfect blood sugars, and those things just can't coexist. So it has to be
Yeah.
a conscious moment of, for me on Thanksgiving, I literally kind of made a deal with myself. I'm going to eat everything. I'm going to eat all that I want. And yeah, I'm going to do my best to, dose with insulin. But guess what? My blood sugars didn't do that well that day. But if you can actually commit to this concept of I'm going to give myself a little grace for this day or this week or whatever, rather than setting yourself up for failure and just beating yourself up about it the whole time, I don't know. It's probably easier said than done. But have a plan, I suppose, of what your approach is going to be to the holidays. Okay, that's why gym memberships go way up on January 1st or whatever, is because everyone gives themselves that period to kind of let go a little bit, and then I'm going to buckle down and, lose the weight, whatever.
But then they stop going after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know what? It's so important to hear what Jeremy said. During the holidays, it's a tough time.
Yeah.
And that's it. I had some low carb coffee creamer, like coconut cream in my coffee, and my blood sugar is like 172 with 2 arrows up now. I don't care when it says low carbs. When it tastes great, it's not good for you.
I think, for people that maybe have type 2 diabetes, who may or may not have CGMs or insulin pumps or any of those things, and maybe they're not checking, they don't have access to all their blood sugars all the time. So, they maybe not watching their blood sugars after every meal, which maybe that's okay over the holidays, maybe it's better for your psyche. But also they have less that they can do about it in a sense, because they may not be able to give if your blood sugar is a little high after Christmas dinner, they may not even have insulin to give a correction bolus. And I think again that's partly just accepting that and understanding that and being okay with it. But you can also think a little bit about how you can enjoy the holidays without overindulging. So one approach is just to say, screw it, I'm going to do whatever I want for 3 weeks. But another approach is say, hey, I really want to enjoy myself and I want to try a bite of every dessert and I want to spend time with my family. But I'm going to watch my portion sizes. I'm going to think a little bit about, how many carbohydrates I'm eating just to keep it reasonable. I'm going to go for a walk after dinners and that sort of stuff. And, you probably will feel better for it anyway if,
Totally.
without overeating. So again, it's really just such a personal decision how you want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, great points from all of you. And I would just add, give yourself a break because it's hard over the holidays. And just remember that if you indulge in something, that is not going to lead, if you indulge in something for a couple of, parties over the holidays, that's not going to lead to a complication.
That's important.
We're really talking about kind of not paying attention to these things over the long term. So it's okay to indulge every now and then. I like the approach of, every now and then, just go for it. And every now and then, decide how to kind of do things in moderation. So all really good points. We're almost out of time. Any closing words from each of you before we wrap up?
Happy holidays. This is kind of, like I said, it's a funny time. It's an exciting time. I hope everyone has a really nice holidays for the rest of the year. I guess be safe if you're using insulin. Wear a CGM, have a diet buddy, have a glucagon rescue kit, and someone around you knows how to use it, especially if you are imbibing alcohol, which we didn't really get into. But really, be safe and happy holidays.
My mic works, but I like holding that thing.
Yeah, I was going to hold it too.
Well, I was just going to say, I want to wish everyone happy holidays and have a healthy, New Year's and a good next year. And I should mention though that, and I've mentioned it before, we have our face-to-face conference, the first one in 4 years, at the Paradise Point in San Diego for people with type 1 diabetes. It goes from Friday to Sunday. We have an awesome program. We're going to try to make the main lectures virtual as well for some of you that can't travel out there. And I can't emphasize enough our Access website page. A lot of people just do not take advantage of the programs that are out there. We hear that from the companies all the time. And our video vault is quite extensive. Ever since we became virtual, we have lectures on every topic, and they're in multiple areas. We got this, my favorite is the button that says songs and games. We have Jeopardy games. We have 8 original songs, including the one we're gonna sort of end with today. So hang on there at the end. And thank you very much for coming on today.
Yeah, I just echo, this has been great. It's got me in the holiday spirit. Recording all these things is always so much fun, the songs, etc. I'll just make a final plug that it is the end of the year. If you have any kind of giving spirit, that please do donate to TCOYD. It takes a lot of time, energy, and cost to put these on completely free, and we're dependent on your donations to keep it going. So there's donate buttons, I think, all around the conference platform, or you can go to the website, tcoyd.org, and click donate. We greatly appreciate it. And if you do donate it, there's a very good chance that Steve will call you. He makes an effort to call everybody. So if you want to talk to Steve, please donate. So have a happy holidays. And I think we're going to end with our kind of an encore performance of our song. So enjoy. All right.